Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. It's a pleasure to have you with us for a portion of your day. We'll get started here in a moment. Let's let people, at least everybody in the waiting room, get into the room. Our numbers are growing pretty rapidly. We had quite a number in the waiting room waiting, and I think we've about hit the number we had there, and we're continuing to grow, and I'm sure we'll see more people join us over the next few minutes, as is always the case. But welcome. Thank you for being here. We have an interesting conversation in store. Well, I always think we have interesting conversations, but this one is one that I think really touches a nerve. It's the AI issue. It's artificial intelligence and how you can use artificial intelligence, and how maybe you should be using artificial intelligence, and how others who are highly skilled practitioners, patent practitioners, are currently using artificial intelligence. And along the way, we're going to debunk some of the myths that you think you know about these tools. And as we were just talking in the green room, not to take anybody's thunder away, and I'm sure this will come up during the webinar, if your understanding of these tools is based on something from 3 months ago or 6 months ago or longer ago, you have really no idea. These tools are changing all the time, and that's why I continue to say, and I'll say it again right here, right now, if you're not investigating, if you're not at least dipping your toe in, if you're not starting to use these tools, you run the real risk of being left behind, because others, like one of our guests here today, is using them all the time, every day, and seeing advantage to doing so. So I appreciate your time, and what I'd like to do is let me kick it over to Renee to introduce our speakers. Renee?
Yes, thank you. And good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. On our panel, we have Robert Plotkin. He's a patent attorney with over 25 years in innovative software experience and a co-founder of the boutique patent firm Blue Shift IP. A lifelong AI aficionado and MIT computer science graduate, he published his first book in 2009 on AI patent strategies titled The Genie in the Machine: How Computer Automated Inventing is Revolutionizing Law and Business. And recently he published his latest book, AI Armor: Securing the Future of Your AI Company with Strategic Intellectual Property. Robert owns more than 25 patents himself and patent applications, and is a National Law Journal IP trailblazer and an IP super lawyer. So thank you so much, Robert, for being here today. Next, we have Samir Raiyani. He is the CEO of IP Author, where he spearheads the development of innovative patent drafting tools for IP law firms and corporate patent groups. With a background rich in technology and business leadership, Samir has been instrumental in guiding IP Author through substantial growth phases, enhancing its offerings with cutting-edge AI technologies. Prior to his role at IP Author, Samir held various executive positions in tech-driven companies, contributing to his profound understanding of IP and software solutions. And last but not least, we have Quinn as our moderator. He is a patent attorney and a leading commenter on patent law and innovation policy. He founded IP Watchdog in 1999 and since has twice been named one of the top 50 most influential people in IP. He is regarded as an expert on software patentability and U.S. patent procedure, and has repeatedly been recognized as one of the top IP professionals across the world. So you are in great hands with this panel. Back to you, Gene.
Great. Thanks a lot, Renee. And thank you for being here, Robert, Samir. And what I should say is I'm a fan of Robert. I've been a fan of his ever since Genie in the Bottle. And I wrote the foreword for his most recent book, and I recommend them to you if you're interested in artificial intelligence, you're interested in software and computers, and you're obviously one of us because you're here. You'll find his books to be great reads, and I think it'll give you some good ideas. So, gentlemen, before we dive into the PowerPoint presentation that we have prepared for the audience today, what I'd like to do is try and get your preliminary thoughts on this topic, big picture. When you hear about generative AI tools for drafting patent applications, what is the first thing that pops into your mind? Samir, why don't we start with you?
The first thing that pops in my mind is science fiction. I thought this whole technology, this whole trail that we are blazing, it is very sci-fi-ish. I still pinch myself sometimes, like, hey, are we really able to do this? But guess what? We are here. It's happening. And we have proof, in somebody like Robert, who is actually drafting patents every day using AI. And so I'm very excited to share what we have been building and how we've been kind of addressing problems and taking advantage of this amazing technology that has been created in the form of generative AI. And we are very thankful to be part of the community. Now, this is the third or fourth time we are on the IP Watchdog webinar series, and we have had amazing interactions with the entire community. So I'm really looking forward to sharing what we have prepared today for you. And it's extremely exciting.
Yeah, no, this is very exciting, and like I say, this touches a nerve. We've had almost 500 people register for this webinar. So if you're wondering whether or not anybody else is interested in this as you are, or starting to use this now, I can tell you definitively the answer is yes, they are, and so it's time to get off the sidelines, I think. And we have Robert you use this tool all the time, from what I understand, right?
Yeah, I do. I use Samir's tool. I do use a variety of AI tools. And I think, you asked big picture. Look, I'm a lawyer. I'm speaking here to my people. And as lawyers, we have a few different qualities, right? One of them is we are problem solvers. We are pragmatic people. We like to get things done. We like to get things done effectively and efficiently. But there's another part of us, which is that we tend to be pretty conservative. And I don't mean politically, I mean when it comes to changing how we do things, and there's good reason for that. The law itself is inherently conservative because things have been done for a long time for a reason, because they work. And sometimes when you start fiddling with things like the way you practice law or with the content of the law, you can make unexpected changes that cause problems. So the main thing I'd like to get across in this webinar today is I see a lot of lawyers, I think, expressing the conservative side of themselves to the detriment of their pragmatic side when it comes to AI. They see an AI tool, they notice a problem with it, and then they criticize it and write it off and won't look into it any further. And what I would urge, and I hope through today's presentations will convey to lawyers, is to use that analytical side of you to take a more holistic view of the AI tools that are out there, recognize their weaknesses and their flaws, but also be open to seeing their strengths, and then use that pragmatic problem-solving side of you to figure out how you can weave AI tools into your legal practice in a way that takes advantage of their strengths, minimizes their weaknesses, and helps you get things done more effectively and efficiently.
Great, excellent. So before I just open up the PowerPoint, what I'd like to do, we have a couple poll questions we'd like to ask you. Let me launch the first one, which will give us an idea about who it is we're talking to and what your pain points really are. It asks you what your biggest challenges are with respect to drafting patent applications. I think we could probably guess what the answers are going to be here, although the early ones are kind of all over the map. So we'll give this a minute to unwind here and give everybody an opportunity to answer the question. And let me start to, I think I can share my screen while that's going on. And while we'll have the poll question up, what I would also like to do is let folks know I'll be monitoring the Q&A box. So if you have a question for the panel, please use the Q&A feature. If you want to chat amongst yourselves or you have a technical issue, feel free to use the chat. And Manik will also be in the chat to answer any specific questions that you have that you don't necessarily need us to address as a part of the webinar panel conversation. But let's see. I think we can probably close out this poll. So let me end the poll and let me share the results here. And we see that the winner here is time constraints, and about equal our high costs and assuring legal compliance and accuracy. Any surprises there, Samir?
Yes, a little bit of surprise that collaboration is not such a major issue. We do hear about it, but I understand that if you're talking about the biggest challenge, collaboration definitely probably comes second. And time constraints, that's what we're going to talk about today. So I can see that. So not too surprised by it, Gene. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I think we're going to talk about collaboration here. We talked about it a little bit amongst ourselves, because I do think if you get better collaboration earlier on, then it does address the time constraints issue, and it does also reduce costs. So in some ways, all of these things are tied together, I suppose. But why don't we just jump right into the first slide? And Samir, can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Yes. So, it's almost now coming to 2 years when, ChatGPT got to the kind of the point where it became very, very relevant to the patent business. And that would be, I think, when ChatGPT hit the 3.5 mark, the version 3.5. So in the 2 years, we have been pushing the envelope of AI, generative AI, and using it all the way from concept to commercialization, right? And we are seeing the impact of generative AI on the patent process from end to end. What do I mean by that? So we are using generative AI today for everything from invention disclosure to patent searching, to drafting, to office action response, to classifying patents, to collecting evidence of use, all the way to claim charting. So it's an end-to-end, the impact is from end to end. And we have been developing tools for each of these work processes, and we've been seeing massive adoption in the industry. Over 150 companies, law firms around the world in 15 different countries have adopted our IP author platform. They're using it for a variety of different use cases that I've listed here. Next slide, please. So that our tool suite consists of, patent searching, drafting, and office action response. These three major categories. So, conducting a patent search, conducting a non-patent literature search, drafting patent applications for US and for Europe, including each of the sections. So for example, generating diagrams, generating claims, writing lengthy descriptions, removing profanities, all of the above are taken care of by our platform. In terms of office action responses, again, we respond to office actions in US and Europe. We take the inputs, the office action that has been created by the patent office, and then our tool responds to it systematically, creating the arguments, generating amendments, interacting with the user, and improving the responses, etc. So this is what our tool suite does. This is what we have power users like Robert here today are using this platform and getting tremendous amounts of efficiency in their day-to-day work with the help of these tools. So this is just me setting the stage for what we have on from a platform perspective. We're not going to do a demo today. We are not going into too many of the details. I just wanted to lay it out so that you know what we are talking about in case you haven't been paying attention. And surprise, surprise, many people are too busy even to be paying attention. So we always want to make sure that you know what we're talking about. Thank you, Gene.
Okay, great. Robert,
can I mention one thing
Sure,
here?
go ahead.
Which
Sure.
is, Samir, one of the things you mentioned was patent classification. And I think it's a good opportunity to point out that not all AI is generative AI. The focus of this webinar is primarily on generative AI. But for me, as someone who practices in the software field, being able to predict with high certainty what art unit an application is going to go into based on the claims is extremely valuable because of the great discrepancy in allowance rates between art units. And so that's using predictive AI, not generative AI, and it's super valuable. So I just want to point out to the audience, not all AI is generative AI, and non-generative AI can be extremely useful for certain tasks.
Yes. So, I mean, in general, I mean, if we go a little bit under the hood, we have been mixing and matching different models to get the best outcomes across this entire set of capabilities. So when we talk about searching, for example, we don't just purely use generative AI because we find that, things that are non-generative in nature, other models also add a significant amount of value when it comes to searching. When we are doing office action responses, again, there are areas where we use other types of models as well. And that's really part of the offering. And today, the technology has advanced to a level where mixing and matching different LLMs, mixing and matching different generations of model has become necessary. And users, sophisticated users, especially like Robert, expect the platforms to be able to do that. And we've been working with AI for about a dozen years or so, working through various generations. So we've established a lot of expertise in using that. And yes, in areas like pattern classification, you have a lot of room to refine your results with the help of various generations of AI technology that we have at our disposal today. So it's a very exciting time to have so many tools available. Sometimes you feel like a kid in a candy store, and sometimes you feel overwhelmed, especially because the vendors are very good at hyping up various platforms. So they'll be like, oh, we've got O1 and we're sending O3 to you in 2025. And so there's a lot of that also happening. But we want to reassure you that if you use IP Author or platform, we will be using the latest, greatest technology available in the most sort of safe and usable fashion. That is our guarantee. That is our commitment.
Excellent. Good. So I know the slides are now going to pivot to some of the myths and to clean up so that everybody has an understanding of what can actually be accomplished and how and why, that sort of thing. Before we get there, we do have a question about the slides, about whether the slides will be made available. And yes, we will make sure everybody gets the slides. We will follow up by email. And I suspect usually my team has already got them loaded onto the internet and has probably provided a link in the chat to where you can actually get the slides right now if you want to download them, but we will follow up and make sure everybody gets them. Then we have a question also here about why would I use AI? AI is not wiser than me. It doesn't necessarily seem to do searches better than me. So what is the justification for using AI? And Robert, I see a smile on your face, so maybe I'll go to you first. And just to let people, you do highly sophisticated patent applications and prosecution. You prosecute AI, right? You're doing AI inventions in software of all different flavors. So what say you about what is the justification?
So I can, one, use an analogy to why would you ever delegate tasks to anyone else other than yourself, a human? And especially if they're not as skilled as you. Why would you ever hire a junior associate or a law student or someone else who's not as good as you? There's lots of reasons. It can save you time. Even if you have to review their work and correct it, it can still be a net cost saver, right? If you have processes in place for deciding which types of tasks to delegate to that person and have processes in place for reviewing and supervising their work, and you do that already, I assume. You don't do everything in your practice on your own, all the drawings, all the searching, everything else. So if you already have an answer to that, then I think you can have the same answer for AI. You just evaluate it like you would evaluate a person and ask, what is it good at? What is it not? What processes do I need in place to choose when to use the right tool for the right job and how to do quality assurance? The second thing I'll say is that even if we take into account some of the limitations of AI, like hallucinations and so forth, the relatively good quality of it and incredible speed makes it really valuable for certain tasks, like summarizing a document. As long as you go into it knowing that a summary from AI, really like any summary, is inherently a lossy process. It loses information. But if what it does is in 5 seconds gives you a good high-level overview of, let's say, a 100-page document that lets you orient yourself to it so that when you review the document yourself, you can get to the heart of it more easily. That's a great use case. I can go through, a long laundry list of use cases like that, but that's just one example.
Yeah, no, and we're going to talk more about this as we move to the next few slides. I think it'll just come up naturally. But from my take on this is that I do think if what you're expecting is I'm going to give it a paragraph or maybe 2 paragraphs, and it's going to spit out a 50 to 100-page patent application that doesn't need any review, you're going to be very disappointed right now. I mean, it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic when the clients have expected us to be able to do that as patent practitioners forever. We all know that. We laugh and joke about it. It's just as unrealistic with you trying to expect that AI is going to do that. What AI is like is having a really, really very well-trained associate or patent agent that can do things like almost instantaneously. So I think what you're going to see is like, why, if you've ever sent work overseas, for example, not to single out any particular country, but we all know there's a number of places where you can get bargain basement work done. And what you get back, in my experience, is not all that good usually. Sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's not very good, but it gets you started. So you justify, okay, well, at least it got me going, and I can then use that and take it and modify. AI, the tools available right now today, are going to get you way, way further down the road than sending something overseas, and you get to be the master of the document. You continue to control the document from start to finish, and you can collaborate with the client a little bit better, which we're going to, I know, talk about here in a minute. So let me just push to the next slide so that we can dive into this in a bigger way. And Robert, you brought up the issue of hallucinations, and Samir, you did, I think, as well, or at least we were talking about this before we went live. And Samir, there was something that you mentioned that your team has been testing stuff, and you have a little bit of a revelation about the hallucination issue. You want to share that with us?
Yes. So hallucinations come up, right? Like if you've been paying attention to the media, you will hear about hallucinations related to AI, and they're funny, and they create a lot of controversy, and the press enjoys kind of highlighting those types of things. But guess what? Hallucinations are so 2023, maybe early 2024. We are in 2025, and you can try it. Like we had our team try just using ChatGPT. Okay, I'm not talking about our tool. So our tool, just to set the framework, our tool sets up a lot of guardrails. We have the tool is connected to the entire patent database. The tool has a number of guardrails. We combine a set of models to work together to make sure that there are no hallucinations, that everything is accurate and in line with your expectations, right? So forget hallucinations. We want the patent applications to be very closely connected to your concept, to the idea that you're working on. So we have a lot of those guardrails. But let's leave aside our tool for the moment. We had our team over the last few days actually test the LLMs, the large language models, the generative AI models out of the box. And we found that it's actually quite hard to make ChatGPT hallucinate today. Of course, you can set it to, like, they have some controls where you can make it go a little more creative. Like, you can set it to go 1 on a 0 to 1 scale of creativity. And at that point, you can get it to hallucinate. But if you are at 0, which is what, they call it the temperature. If you set the temperature to 0 today and start working with it, it's very hard to get it to hallucinate. And that's a remarkable advance, in just a few months that we have made in this technology. But Robert can share his views on it. Just to make sure you understand, Robert has been working with AI for a couple of decades. he is not new to this technology. He writes books on this. So he has a very strong historical perspective to this technology as well. So over to you, Robert, on this topic.
Yeah, it's very important to tell people that the models themselves are improving, but I'm going to probably keep harping on my soapbox, which is use the right tool for the right job. You know, you mentioned earlier, Samir, that for doing prior art searching, generative AI models may not be the right tool to use. I think for doing case law research and getting accurate citations to cases, which has been some of the controversies that's hit the news when lawyers submit briefs that have fake case citations, I don't know that a generative language model is the best tool to use for that job. So you have to learn which tools, including which models and which applications built on those models, are right for the right task. And where you need exact accuracy of citation, generative AI is probably not the right tool. Even that being said, there are generative AI applications that can search the web and supplement or search a database. And like you said, Samir, be connected to a database to check their own output against it, and thereby either eliminate or reduce the likelihood of hallucinations. So that's the first thing. Use the right tool for the right job. But it also means on the other side, there's lots of tasks we as patent lawyers do that benefit from what I would call brainstorming, rather than to use the derogatory term hallucination, which is to say, take an input from us and give us a bunch of variations on it. I mean, think about, you've got a mechanical device that has a few components, and you want to figure out, well, what are a variety of ways in which the spring can be implemented, you know, in this thing. Well, tell me, what are a bunch of ways? And you can use that to generate a variety of outputs, right? Now, it's also then very important, you have to evaluate the output yourself based on your own knowledge. I often say that the people who benefit the most from generative AI are people who are already experts in a particular field, whether it's patent law or some field of engineering, because you then have the ability to easily do your own hallucination checking after the fact, right? And at a low cost and quickly see if there's anything that's obviously out of line. And if you can do that, you can use generative AI to help you brainstorm, expand your perspective, come up with new ideas. And in those situations, what we call hallucination is actually a feature and it's not a bug.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, you know, listening to you talk, Robert, about the right tool for the right job. I mean, that's always been you know, from when we were swinging hammers, or, you know, a rock, you can nail a hammer, hit a nail on the head with a rock, but a hammer is going to be a much better tool. I mean, goes back to just everything, right? And about 10 months ago, I guess it was, very famously at the time, and I think it may have been, I shouldn't say, it was one of the generative tools widely available. There was a reporter that asked for a picture of George Washington, and what was returned was a picture of an African-American gentleman in a Halloween costume dressed up as George Washington. And that was like, oh my God, you know, AI can't even give us a picture of maybe the most famous American of all time. And I had a friend who does AI codes, you know, like, he's not one of us, he's one of our client type. And he's like, you can't ask a tool that has not been trained on image recognition to recognize images. This is what you get when you do that. He's like, you know, it's a predictable. In Subway, he joking around said, it's surprising it got so close, you know, because that's not what that's for. Right. And so that's a big part of this thing is you have to understand, sometimes you're going to need predictive AI. Sometimes you're going to need generative AI. And sometimes you're just going to need really, really fast computers to crunch a whole lot of things very quickly. Right. Which I suppose is AI, or at least in the Robert Turing definition of AI, it's so fast it appears as if it's human. So there's a lot of variety of what qualifies as AI, and you have to use the right tool for the right job, and that's never changed since the dawn of time. And if you have the right tool for the right job gets much, much easier. So, okay, let me look at, okay, well, we're doing pretty good on time. Samir, anything to say before we move to the next slide?
So I would just reiterate that hallucinations really are not a problem with the current generation of AI. and tools built on top of those, especially when it comes to patent work, right? And one can work with them freely. Obviously, as Robert would say, as everybody who uses these tools would say, you have the final responsibility. So you have to supervise, you have to review the work, especially if you are deep into a technology area where the AI may not have been sufficiently trained. You still need to look at, like, for example, if you are saying, okay, generate all the alternatives for this particular compound that can be used as a filler in this particular product. Some of those compounds that it may suggest may not be appropriate, or you may not think they are appropriate. And it's your job to supervise and remove those compounds that it may have suggested incorrectly. But outside of that, like, when you give it an idea and say, tell me about it, or, write a little description of it, or write a few claims for it, you're not going to be in hallucination territory anymore, which is amazing. And obviously, as these tools progress, we will see less and less of that. And so, yeah, this is a myth that hopefully we can put to rest here today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And certainly for the highly specialized tools. I mean, we're not suggesting, I don't think anybody would suggest go online to ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these other open tools and expect that they're going to be able to help you write a patent application. That's not what we're talking about. But so you have the extra layer of these models are getting better with respect to hallucination all the time, and it's curated for use by us. Okay, which is another layer, I think, of certainty. But let me push to the next slide so we can get that out. And while Samir, while you're telling us what we have here, I'm going to push the next poll question to start getting people to tell us about what they think is why they would adopt AI or generative AI tools here. But take it away, Samir.
Yes. So the question is, or the myth is that editing AI takes more time than manual drafting. So the general feedback, especially when the product was new to the market a year and a half ago, we would get this feedback. The users would try the tool for one patent application or for half an office action, and they would be like, you know what, it was so annoying that I just stopped using it midway. I can do this work myself and so much faster, so much quicker, and I can get done with it within no time at all. These things, all they're doing, these tools, all they're doing is they're wasting our time. We don't get this feedback anymore because people have realized that now the quality of the work product they get, usually, at least at the first draft, is superior to what they were doing. And they kind of recognize that. So now we don't get this feedback anymore. But still, people who aren't using these tools or who may have had one bad experience often tell us that, these things are taking too much time. I can just do it faster myself. It's like in the self-driving car world, right? And which is what we often draw analogies with, because that technology is, some steps ahead of us in terms of adoption in the market. In case of self-driving car, right? Like, there are people who will not use adaptive cruise control or lane keeping in their own cars. And that is baffling. Those technologies are obviously making us safer. But people are like, no, I did this thing one time in traffic on this freeway near this exit. I'm never going to use it again. So that is the kind of feedback we get about efficiency. And so we talked to our power users like Robert, and we said, what do you think is going on? And he enlightened us, and we will hear from him now.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Robert.
Well, I'll say that, for example, in Samir's office action tool, this goes to your point, Gene. It doesn't work by you putting an input in and then creating the whole thing for you. I mean, maybe, Samir, you'll work towards that goal and eventually you'll do it. And in a year or two from now, I'll come back and say you did it. Instead, it takes you through a number of steps in which you provide feedback. and you can tweak things as you go. And to me, intuitively, that makes sense as the way to go. And in practice, it's what's worked for me. In that you get summaries of prior art. You can provide feedback on what the invention is, on what the claims mean, on potential claim amendments. You can manually edit things. You can suggest automatically generated revisions. This feedback loop is really, really important to use the self-driving car analogy, to stop, right? If you got in your car, quote, semi-autonomous car, and just let it go, it might start off in the right direction, but from making a slight deviation, eventually, right, it would take you into a river. You need to be able to make the course corrections along the way. Samir's Office Action tool does that. You know, there are other tools out there. I would say to anybody, one reason I think lawyers get frustrated is they go in with an expectation, and maybe because this is what some companies are trying to market, is that you come to us, we can do the whole job for you in an automated way. And that is a setup for disappointment. And it's also not consistent with a lawyer's practice or obligations. But anything that uses more of a interactive, whether you call it co-pilot model or assistant model, that puts you in the loop, that's what's going to be both consistent with what you need and more effective and efficient.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot here. What I've always told people is when I was, and I don't represent people at the moment, I do my full attention to IP Watchdog, but I got to the point in my career where people would say, I want you to represent me. Fine, good. No, I want you to do the first, I want you to do everything. It's like, okay, well, you really don't want that. I mean, because I don't add any benefit. There's no delta to Gene doing the first draft. You know, what it does is it requires me to spend a lot of time and energy to get to a first draft that is going to be marginally better than somebody who can spend a lot more time and is a lot less, costs a lot less and more economical to do that. To get me a draft that now you want to pay me for the value I can add, not for putting all the pieces and the parts together in the first instance. So that's why I think AI and these tools are so exciting, is it can get you as the experienced practitioner to a point much, much faster than ever before to adding that value, which is why people are wanting to come to you and they're paying you is for your value add, not for all these little things that you really don't add any value to. And I think that's one of the frustrating things that it feels for a lot of practitioners for a very long time is we have to do more and more for less and less. The clients won't pay anymore. And it's right, because you have to do a lot of, for lack of a better way of saying it, grunt work to get to the point where you can actually add value. And that's not the case anymore. It's just not the case.
Let me add something on that.
Go ahead.
To go way back. I don't know if anyone in the audience is familiar with Fred Brooks's book, The Mythical Man Month, right? This is written from his experience work on the IBM 360 back in the 1960s. So he had a bunch of adages that came out of it. One of them was, plan to throw one away. You will anyway, meaning the first draft of anything, the first prototype of a product is mostly a learning experience.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said. It gets you to that point where you can evaluate it and start working on the real product. And you can see AI as helping you generate that first thing that you may throw away or significantly revise, but it has incredible value anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because so much of what we do, we have to get our heads wrapped around it. Until you get your head wrapped around it, you just can't possibly do it. So this is a tool at the minimum that's going to help you do that much, much faster. And so I think it's exciting times, myself. Now, we did have a question over in the Q&A that I know that mentioned something about, well, does this address drafting requirements for a variety of different geographies, I guess you might say, European, Asian, US. And so I wanted to tackle that simply to point out one of the features I think is really interesting. Samir, you mentioned when we were in the green room that Robert, you've used this, I guess, right? Where you train the tool using examples written by Robert, so that way when Robert gets the draft, it's actually a draft for him. It's like, can you explain that a little bit, Samir? Because I think that addresses that question a little bit.
Yes. So two parts. So the next myth is about personalization. So that is the next myth we are going to bust. So yeah, it's a nice segue. But before that, let me talk about the various geographies and various patent offices. So we have attacked two patent offices currently. One is the US Patent Office as well as the European Patent Office. So we do patent drafting in US style as well as European style out of the box. So all you need to do is click a button and say, I want European style claims. We also have created the office action tool to handle both US and European office actions. And there, you know that there are substantial differences in terms of how these office actions are delivered to you, how they are, how the responses are created. Like, in Europe, you are doing it in two phases. First, you get the search report, and then you get the substantive examination report, etc. So we are handling the European style office actions as well as US office actions out of the box and in their own specific styles. And in terms of drafting also, we are able to draft in both US and European styles as well. Now, as far as other patent offices go, we will get to them in due course. But by using one or the other styles, you can probably already use it for your respective patent office, because these are the two sort of trend-setting patent offices in the world. For example, we have a number of users in many countries which are not part of the European Patent Office world or part of the US Patent Office world. And those users are happily using our tools. As I said, we are in 15 countries. Some of them are European countries, of course, US, but also countries like Canada, India, China, Taiwan, because people realize that they can take the draft from our tool and just adapt it or translate it to their particular jurisdiction, and they can make minor modifications and send it to the patent office. So we have happy users around the world. So that is, I'll pause here if Gene or Robert, if you would like to add anything to this, the geography question.
So I think, what Gene mentioned was, Samir, how we work together to personalize the tool to my style. Look, I'm not surprising any patent lawyers when I say we can be very picky about exactly how we write things. I mean, how many debates have I had with people about may versus can, for example? I mean, pick your favorite. But we are very particular. And I joke about it, but it actually, when we go back to the previous myth about does it take more time to edit versus doing it yourself, it can make a big difference. If the draft that comes out is substantially different from your own personal style or preferences or your firm's guidelines or your corporate guidelines, and it takes a lot of effort for you to go through and change those cans to mays and the invention to embodiment and all that, that can really be a pain. So there are ways to customize things, to write more in your style. And Samir, you can tell me from the technology side, but I'll tell you that just as you said, the out-of-the-box language models now have just gotten really good at doing few-shot prompting or in other ways, learning from examples of how to generate output that's in the same style or using the same phrasing as those examples. So there are now really easy, effective ways to customize the output of LLMs to your own preferences.
Yeah. Yes. Now, obviously, the holy grail here is to make sure that the work product is optimal, and that's what we have been always aiming for. So there is the style element that is very important, and as Robert said, we have a recipe of how we can adapt the tool to your style. So based on your examples, based on your preferences, the tool can adapt fairly quickly, the output to your style. But we are going a step further, right? Our endeavor always under the hood is to create the optimal output, right? So we have access to all the information in the world. We have the entire patent database, we have the office action history, all of that information is available for all of the patents that have been, drafted, filed, prosecuted. So what we can do, and what we are doing, is taking that information, ingesting it, and trying to create the most optimal output. So for example, if you are going into a particular domain that you may or may not be an expert on, we will make sure that the output is optimal for that domain based on the past historical patterns, right? So that is where we are going with our platform. We are already doing some of that at a variety of levels, like trying to make sure that the optimal output is generated. But we also want to make sure that it is geared towards each industry segment, each particular technology type, and so on. So at this point, the combination of us using the best practices ingested from all of the patent jurisprudence out there, patent prosecution out there, and then combining it with your own style preferences, you can imagine that the quality of the output can be very, very high. And that's where we are going with this right now. And we are making really good headway on that front.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just add, this is a good example of what Gene, you said, and Samir said earlier about how if you're going based on your knowledge from a year ago or so, it is true. When ChatGPT first came out, and even for a little while after that, a lot of output from those models was very generic. And it's a very legitimate critique. Even now, if you use ChatGPT out of the box, it can produce really generic output. But the models themselves have improved, and Samir, tools like what Samir's company have are designed to build on top of those models, to build in additional customization tools that you can't get from the models themselves. So don't make these decisions based on either outdated information or on your experience with generic out-of-the-box tools like ChatGPT.
Yeah, yeah. So we have a couple questions I'd like to hit here, make sure we get to them, and then we'll do the last slide here in a minute. But this one is specifically to Robert. I have some thoughts on it as well. It's, how do you convince a client that IP Author would be beneficial for you to use? And I'm going to tag on my own question here. Is, do you have clients right now that they're expecting you to be using some form of AI to help your drafting?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm in a strange situation in that I tend to work with software companies, including a lot of AI companies. Mm-hmm. So I have had clients either ask in a suggestive way whether I would or could or am using these tools, and some who actively want me to use them. And I've had clients who've given me good suggestions for how to make better use of AI in the patent practice. I had a client last year who was thinking of investing in developing their own in-house tool. They didn't do it, but this is really active area of interest. And again, maybe I would say fortunate to be in the position where I have clients who are not only not opposed to it, but in favor of it, because they understand the benefits, and even though they understand the risks, they know enough about how to overcome those that they're really in favor of it, because they know it can be to their benefit for me to use it.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to say. And I don't know that you're unique. Obviously, your practice is very unique and specialized. But I think attorneys outside of this, AI, heavy, complex computer software space, are similarly having clients, particularly larger clients who are themselves more sophisticated. There is the expectation that they will be using tools, and they are using tools. Now, obviously, ethically, you want to let them know, but this is not this. So like Samir said, this is so 2023, when we first had this, is like, okay, you don't use these tools unless you've talked to the client, you consult with them, and all that ethical stuff still applies. But what you see nowadays is the client is expecting you to use these tools. And if you're not, there will be some clients that aren't going to want to work with you for that reason. So I think there's a benefit there. And the other one here that we talked about how this is beneficial for experienced practitioners. What is the benefit for inexperienced practitioners? And my initial thoughts there, Robert, I'll get your thoughts here. But is you as an inexperienced practitioner still on a lot of levels don't know where to put everything, how to put everything into the application, how to form it. And you're running the risk of staring at the blank page. You know, if you stare at a blank page, whether you're writing or whether you're typing in Word or whatever it is, the more time you stare at a blank page, the only thing that happens is you're going to stare at the blank page longer. It becomes crippling, paralyzing. So these tools can get you to at least a good draft that you can then move forward with and put it all together. So I think that there are definitely use cases for people who are at the very beginning of their career and don't have an awful lot of experience. What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's the benefit is that people who are starting out can use these tools to get good output and a good understanding. Look, generative AI in general can take everyone and make them at least average, right? Because the tools are trained on generic output. The risk is that, I keep going back to this not falling asleep at the wheel need. I would just hope and encourage people who are at the beginning of their careers to have their eyes open and know that if they're using a tool to help them get past a blank page problem, to know that the output is sort of only as good as the input, and that, yeah, it may be pretty good what they get out. It may be better than what they could have done on their own, but that they don't yet have the knowledge or skill to improve that or verify it or proofread it or do all those things that a more experienced practitioner would have. And I wouldn't want them to lull themselves into a false sense of confidence or security that output is sort of good enough to be final and it's better than it is. That's the main risk. And I think we have a bigger conversation. We talked about this before. It's for a separate webinar about, does the profession have any responsibilities when it comes to how do we shepherd young or new people into the field now in light of all this? But that's a separate conversation.
Yeah, that's a different conversation. Yeah. All right. So we have one more slide left here. So Samir, I'm going to push that slide and invite you to tell us what you have here on the slide. And while we do that, I'm going to launch our last poll question here about what additional features you might want to see in drafting tools. But Samir, what do we have here on this last slide?
Yes. So this is another sort of concern that is often raised when we speak to patent attorneys about using generative AI for patent drafting, especially for patent drafting. And their mental model is that here's an AI that has read all these patents. Usually their idea is that this AI has only read a few patents, and it reads those patents. Then when you come up with your idea, it just regurgitates what it has read. And now, you are kind of reproducing prior art, right? Like, and you are risking the entire endeavor, right? Like writing the whole patent application is at risk because all that this AI did was regurgitated prior art. And the reality is it just doesn't work that way, right? The way these tools work is, first of all, they're generative. They have read a lot more information than just patents, right? They have read everything there is out there in the world. They have read typical AI today. Is an interesting stat that always comes up. It's 15 trillion tokens, right? Any worthwhile generative AI model has read 15 trillion tokens. That's almost like, about 12 trillion words is what these AI have read. Now, the most advanced models, the ones that we use, have read 25 trillion tokens. So about 18 trillion words they have read, they have digested, and that's what they are using for generating these these types of results, right? Like to generate the patent application. So there is a lot of interesting information that they have read, that they are understanding. So that's why you get really good results, regardless of the technology area, the domain you're working on. They are very, very good. They understand the science reasonably well for pretty much any area of science. So you are not regurgitating like, a few words that it has read and it's spitting you out. You are looking at the entire world's information that is being digested and shown to you in the correct order, like, as a really good patent application. That's number one. Number two, there are a lot of guardrails we have put together. Unlike you go to your patent attorney with your invention, the patent attorney usually has no idea what you're inventing, right? But they will read up on it. Guess what? We have the entire patent database connected to the application so that when you put your invention in, the entire patent application is already run against the whole of the world's patent prior art. And then the AI knows what the prior art looks like, what is the closest prior art, before it starts drafting anything. And it will make sure that it tries to navigate around the prior art, right? So in fact, these tools are better. The first draft, we have compared the first draft of a lot of patent applications by a lot of great firms, by a lot of great companies. And by and large, they are always treading over prior art in their first draft and then narrowing. Guess what? That's not necessary in 2025. And our tool, when it comes out with the first set of claims, they're already working around the prior art. Sorry, it was a bit of a long-winded answer, but I kind of got a little worked up about the question. Sorry.
Yeah. No problem. Robert, any thoughts here? I know we're running.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Samir. When he shared this myth with me, I was surprised that people had this myth, because I agree, it's not how the tools work. The only thing I would say is that for me, there are very rare cases when I'm working with an inventor who has such a pioneering invention that they've come up with new terminology that's fundamentally different than what's been used before, or they're reconceiving. I mean, I have a client now who's reconceiving how computer file systems work and is not using any existing concept. There we have to be careful about using generative AI, but that's really, really unusual.
Very unusual. I mean, I always tell people, if you as a patent attorney have one pioneering invention in your career, that's a lot. I mean, most things aren't that. Most things aren't. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that, you're usually using and putting together pieces and parts that have heretofore existed. So that is a good caution. If you're dealing with something truly pioneering, don't make it sound like something ordinary. But I mean, that's just, that's where you as the professional come in,
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Well, this was a wonderful conversation, and we're right at about the end, but I want to give each of you the opportunity to wrap up with your final thoughts and your takeaway message. We'll give Samir the final word, but Robert, what do you want people to walk away here today having heard and remember?
That there's so many options to explore. I would say go into this with an attitude of experimentation and to see what's possible. Of course, keep in mind the risks and the challenges. I think lawyers tend to over-focus on those to detriment of the other side. Try things out. There's no risk to trying something out, let's say for a non-client matter or something, just to see how things work. And the more you use the tools, the more you'll see how you can make them work for yourself.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Robert. And Samir.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Gene. It's been amazing being part of this community, your community that you have so amazingly built and created and nurtured. We really appreciate being part of the community and engaging with all these amazing questions that we got from everybody. I hope we did justice to your questions in real time as well. Thank you to Robert. He has been amazing in terms of giving us feedback, kind of showing us the history, but also the future. It's been amazing working with him, and I hope his insights were useful and timely. Last thing what I would like to say is that we have been doing these webinars on a regular basis now. And what we have found is that, when we set up our users who come through this webinar for a trial, we have a really good process in place. So we will work with you through the course of the trial with multiple webinars, with multiple interactions, and make sure that you are able to adopt the tool for your patent practice. So we have a discount code. We have 20% off on all the IP author modules, drafting, office action, etc. And if you get started today or this week with us, we will make sure we will work with you and with a community of folks to get you up to speed in using tools like ours and getting to the kind of efficiencies that Robert talked about. We again appreciate being part of the community. Thank you very much, and Happy New Year to the entire IP Watchdog world.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Samir, and we really appreciate your support. And I would encourage everybody to reach out and give it a try. It includes, as you see here on this slide, a 14-day free trial. So, you really don't have anything to lose. Give it a try. And I think what you'll see is that you're probably going to be surprised, and it's surprised in a good way. So there's no better time than now to rip off the Band-Aid, because people like Robert are just going to eat your lunch if you continue to sit on the sidelines. So I appreciate you, Robert. I appreciate you, Samir. And thank you, everyone in the audience. Obviously, we greatly appreciate you for being here and spending a portion of your day with us. That's all we have for now, and we hope that you will join us again soon. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.